There are moments in a courtroom when one small gesture tells you everything about a soul. If this touches you, please subscribe. I'm Judge Frank Caprio, and in my 40 years on the bench, I've learned that respect can lift a person and entitlement can bury him. That day, the moral stakes were bigger than one ticket or one young man. They were about whether power excuses poor character. So stay with me because this case still sits in my heart. Hit that like button right now. I've seen thousands of cases here in Providence, and most people come in nervous, even ashamed. But this was different from the first second. Before a word was spoken, I felt a chill that told me this would test not only my patience, but my conscience. The courtroom was full that afternoon. Sunlight came through the high windows and cut across the old wood benches. Join me, subscribe for more. My clerk was moving papers. Officers stood near the back wall. You could hear shoes on the tile and the low whisper of people waiting for their names to be called. I was tired, but steady. Then I looked up and I saw him. Let me take you back to that young man. He was well dressed, crisp shirt, expensive watch, hair fixed just right. Thank you for being here. Please share this. He carried himself like the room belonged to him. Beside him sat his father, a police captain, broad shoulders, jaw tight, uniform pressed. The son leaned back in his chair as if court were an inconvenience, not a place of justice. The charge itself was not the worst I had ever seen. It began as a reckless driving matter, with failure to stop, disrespect to an officer, and misuse of identification. Comment below, was I too harsh? But what turned the room cold was what the arresting officer wrote in his report. When stopped, the young man had reached into his pocket, flashed his father's police badge, and said, "You don't want this problem. Now let me tell you something. I grew up in this neighborhood. My father, God rest his soul, sold fruit and worked 2 jobs. If this moves you, please subscribe. My mother stretched every dollar. I've seen good people struggle with dignity. I've seen mothers skip meals for their children. So when someone with every advantage tries to bend the law with a badge that isn't his, that cuts deep. When the clerk called his name, he didn't stand right away. He looked at his phone first. He smirked. Then he rose slowly, like he was doing us a favor. Hit that like button right now. I asked him if he understood the charges. He shrugged and said, "Yeah, I heard them the first time." The courtroom shifted. Even the air felt heavier. Arrogance has a sound, and that was it. I asked the officer to describe the stop. The officer was calm, professional. He said the defendant had sped through a light, nearly clipped another car, then argued on the roadside. Join me, subscribe for more. He said the young man waved the badge close to his face and added, "My father's a captain, so think carefully." When I heard that, I felt my hands tighten under the bench. Abuse of honor wounds everyone who earned it. I turned to the son and asked, "Did you say those words?" He rolled his eyes before answering. "I might have said something like that," he said. "Thank you for being here. Please share this. Not sorry, not careful, just amused." Then he looked back toward the gallery and gave a little laugh. You know what bothered me most? It wasn't the words alone. It was the pleasure he seemed to take in humiliating a working officer. I've always believed the court staff deserved the same respect as the judge. The clerk asked him to speak clearly for the record. He answered, "Maybe if you listen better, sweetheart." Comment below, was I too harsh? You could hear a gasp. My clerk kept her composure. God bless her. But I saw the hurt in her face. Character is how you treat those who can't help you. My father said that to me, and his voice echoed in my mind. At that moment, the courtroom went silent. Not a healthy silence, a sharp one, the kind that comes before a storm. If this touches you, please subscribe. I looked at his father. The captain stared straight ahead, saying nothing. No correction, no apology, no sign to his son that enough was enough. That silence from the father spoke loudly too. Sometimes what we permit becomes what we teach. The young man crossed his arms and shook his head while the officer spoke. He checked his phone again. He whispered something and laughed. Hit that like button right now. Then, when I asked if he had anything to say for himself, he said, "This is being blown way out of proportion. People know my family. We're not criminals." There it was, not remorse, not truth, just a belief that rules are for other people. In my 40 years on the bench, I've met thieves who cried with shame. I've met men with nothing who still stood tall. Join me. Subscribe for more. But entitlement can be harder than poverty. Poverty can humble a person. Entitlement can blind him. I could feel my frustration rising, not because he broke a traffic law, but because he had turned public service into private privilege. That is poison in a community. And here's the thing. 2 days earlier, I had a woman named Maria. She came in for driving on an expired registration. Thank you for being here. Please share this. She was shaking before she even reached the podium. Her coat was old. Her shoes were worn. She apologized to my clerk before she spoke to me. I asked why the registration had lapsed. Her eyes filled with tears, and she told me she had been choosing between medicine and paperwork. Maria said, "Judge, I know I was wrong. I'm not asking for special treatment. I just need time." Comment below, was I too harsh? She worked nights cleaning offices. She cared for her mother. She brought every paper in a neat folder. She never once blamed anyone else. She never raised her voice. She looked me in the eye with honesty. That kind of humility does something to a courtroom. It invites mercy without demanding it. I remember leaning forward and asking her about her children. She smiled through her tears and said, "They think I can fix everything. If this moves you, please subscribe." Bless her heart. I reduced the fine. I gave her time to comply. I wished her good luck, and the whole room softened. That is what respect can do. It opens the door to compassion. It reminds a judge that justice is not only law, it is also humanity. So when I looked back at the captain's son, the contrast hit me hard. Maria had almost nothing, yet she carried herself with grace. Hit that like button right now. This young man had every advantage, yet acted insulted by accountability. Money can buy a watch. It cannot buy decency. A family name can open doors. It cannot build character. Arrogance is fear in a fancy suit, and that suit was starting to wrinkle in open court. Part of me wanted to show mercy. I always try to see the human being beneath the mistake. Join me. Subscribe for more. I asked myself, is this just youth? Is this a foolish moment? Can a hard lesson be taught softly? Those questions matter. A judge without compassion becomes cold, but a judge without backbone becomes useless. My duty was sitting on one shoulder, and my heart was sitting on the other. I couldn't help thinking of my father. My father, God rest his soul, never had power, but he had honor. Thank you for being here. Please share this. He used to say, "Frank, when people trust you, that trust is sacred. A police badge is sacred too. It stands for long nights, danger, sacrifice, and service. To wave it around for personal gain is not clever. It is a betrayal of every officer who wears it honestly. That night before I ruled, I barely slept. Yes, judges carry cases home sometimes." Comment below, was I too harsh? I heard my father's voice in my mind. I heard my own conscience ask, what lesson will this courtroom teach tomorrow? If I let this slide, what would the young officers think? What would the working families of Providence think? What would that say to Maria and people like her who follow the rules under much harder burdens? I even spoke to my wife about it over dinner. My wife knows my heart better than anyone. If this touches you, please subscribe. She listened quietly while I told her the facts. Then she asked me one question. "Frank, if his last name were different, would you hesitate?" That question stayed with me. Sometimes truth arrives softly. I prayed for guidance that night. I asked God to keep anger out of my decision and leave only clarity. The next morning, when court resumed, I watched him enter again. Same posture, same half-smile. No sign that he had reflected at all. Hit that like button right now. His father sat beside him again. Proud, ashamed, I couldn't tell. That uncertainty weighed on me. I know what it means to love a child. I know how a parent's heart can break in silence. But love does not mean shielding someone from consequences. I called the case. Papers rustled. A clock ticked on the wall. The room felt smaller somehow. Join me. Subscribe for more. I asked the young man one last time if he wished to say anything before I ruled. He sighed and said, "I think this whole thing is ridiculous." Then he added, "My dad served this city for years. You should be thanking him, not punishing me." There it was. The shock of the day, naked entitlement. I felt a surge of anger, and I'll be honest with you, I had to master it. Judges are human. Thank you for being here. Please share this. We feel insult, we feel sadness, we feel disappointment, but we must answer with principle, not temper. I took a breath. I folded my hands. I let the silence sit there. Silence can teach what shouting never will. Everyone in that room knew a line had been crossed. Then I looked at the father. I said, Captain, your service is honorable, but your son cannot wear your sacrifice like a shield. Comment below. Was I too harsh? His eyes dropped for the first time. The sun shifted in place. That was when I knew he had never really imagined this moment. He thought the badge would end the conversation. Instead, it had become the center of it. Privilege had walked into a mirror. Part of me still wanted to rescue him from himself. That is the struggle people rarely see. If this moves you, please subscribe. They see the sentence, not the prayer before it. They see the robe, not the burden under it. I thought again of Maria. I thought of officers who work honestly. I thought of my own parents, who taught me that everyone deserves respect and everyone owes it. Then the path became clear. I looked him in the eye and said, Young man, the court is not impressed by borrowed authority. Hit that like button right now. His smirk faded a little. I continued, You endangered others on the road. You disrespected an officer doing his duty. You insulted court staff. And worst of all, you treated your father's badge like a personal pass. That is not a small mistake. That is a failure of judgment and character. The room was still. I could hear the clock again. I said, Here is my ruling. Join me. Subscribe for more. First, the reckless driving charge will carry the full statutory fine. I explained that speeding through a light risks innocent lives. Second, I am ordering mandatory driving safety classes. I wanted him to learn that roads are shared spaces, not stages for ego. Third, your license will be suspended for a period set by law. I wasn't done. I said, Fourth, because you invoked a police badge for personal advantage, I am referring this matter to the appropriate internal review. Thank you for being here. Please share this. I explained why. A badge must never be used as a family coupon. The public must trust that law enforcement protects the law, not relatives from it. Fifth, before any restoration of driving privileges, you will complete community service focused on traffic victims. Then I gave the reason behind every step. I said, This court punishes conduct, but it also teaches. Comment below, was I too harsh? The fine addresses danger. The classes address ignorance. The suspension addresses recklessness. The review protects public trust. The service addresses empathy. I wanted him to understand that consequences are not revenge. They are structure. They are a fence around behavior that would otherwise hurt people who never asked for trouble. The young man stared at me as if he had misheard. His face lost color. He said, You can't be serious. If this touches you, please subscribe. I answered, I am completely serious. Then he turned toward his father, waiting, almost like a child waiting for rescue. But the captain said nothing. That silence hit harder than any speech. For the first time, the son looked truly alone. Sometimes accountability arrives when the room stops protecting you. He muttered, This is insane. I said, No, son. What's insane is thinking a city owes you a free pass. Hit that like button right now. A murmur moved through the courtroom. I don't enjoy that moment. I never have. A judge should not take pleasure in another person's humiliation. But I stood firm because the ruling was right, not because I wanted to, not because it was easy, because justice needed a spine that day. The father finally spoke, quietly. He said, Your Honor, may I say something? I nodded. Join me. Subscribe for more. He stood and said, My son made a mistake. I replied, Captain, I agree, but mistakes become habits when they are excused. He lowered his head. I could see years of service in that man's face. I could also see a father grieving the truth about what his son had become in public. That night, walking to my car, the Providence air felt cold. Streetlights glowed on the pavement. If this moves you, please subscribe. I remembered being a young man myself. I remembered pride, temper, foolish certainty. Age teaches what youth refuses to hear. I looked up and whispered a prayer. Lord, let this lesson help him. Don't let it only hurt him. That's a prayer I've said for many defendants over the years. At home, my wife was waiting at the kitchen table. She poured me coffee and let me sit in silence first. Hit that like button right now. Then she asked, "How do you feel?" I said, "Sad." Not angry, not triumphant, sad. Because no judge wants to see a young person walk deeper into arrogance. We want people to turn around while there is still time. We want consequences to become turning points, not life sentences of character. She took my hand and said, "Maybe today was the first honest mirror he's ever seen. Join me, subscribe for more." That stayed with me. An honest mirror can feel cruel when you are used to flattery. It can feel harsh when you are used to protection, but truth is still mercy when it stops a person from becoming worse. My wife understood that. She always has. In many ways, she helped settle my heart that night. Weeks later, I heard an update through proper channels. The young man had started his classes. "Thank you for being here. Please share this." He completed the first part of his service without complaint. That mattered to me. Then, months later, he returned on a related administrative issue. And do you know what I saw? Not perfection, not sainthood, but change. He stood straight. He said, "Good morning, Your Honor." He sounded humbled. He told me softly, "I was wrong." No excuse followed, no mention of his father, no smirk. Comment below, "Was I too harsh?" 4 words. I was wrong. In my 40 years on the bench, I've seen those words save people. Not magically, not all at once, but honestly. He said the community service changed him. He had met a family affected by a fatal crash. He said, "I didn't think before, now I do." That mattered. I looked at him carefully. I believe in second chances, but I also believe in evidence. If this touches you, please subscribe. His face was different, softer, less certain, more real. I told him, "Accountability is not the end of your story unless you make it the end." He nodded. Then I wished him good luck. That day, I felt a small peace, not victory, peace. The kind that comes when a hard truth begins to bear fruit. Would I decide the same way again? Yes, I would. And I say that with humility, not pride. Hit that like button right now. Because the sentence was never about making an example out of him for entertainment. It was about protecting the meaning of service, the dignity of the court, and the safety of ordinary people. Here in Providence, every worker, every mother, every officer, every child deserves the same justice under the same roof. People sometimes ask me, "Judge, why did this case stay with you so long?" Here's why. Join me. Subscribe for more. It touched every value I hold dear: family, honor, faith, responsibility. I'm an Italian-American man who grew up believing your name means something only if your conduct honors it. A father's title is not an inheritance of virtue. Virtue must be earned fresh, day by day, by what you do when nobody owes you anything. And let me say this to every parent listening. Love your children deeply. Protect them from harm. Thank you for being here. Please share this. But do not protect them from truth. If you shield them from every consequence, you may also shield them from wisdom. That is too high a price. Better a red face in court than a ruined life later. Better a hard lesson now than a hollow soul that grows more entitled with age. And to every young person listening, hear me clearly. Respect is not weakness. Saying "I was wrong" does not make you small. Comment below, "Was I too harsh?" It makes you teachable. The strongest people I meet in court are often the ones who arrive broken but honest. They do not hide behind names, money, uniforms, or connections. They stand in the truth. And because they do, the truth can begin to rebuild them. So when that young man waved his father's badge, he thought he was showing strength. He was actually revealing weakness. Thank you for being here. Please share this. Fear often dresses itself as swagger. Insecurity often laughs too loudly. Arrogance is fear in a fancy suit. Once I understood that, my anger softened into purpose. My job was not to crush him. My job was to stop the lie before it settled into the bones of his life. So if you ask me for the lesson, here it is. Everyone deserves respect. Everyone owes it. Hit that like button right now. Your family name may open a door, but only your character keeps you in the room. If you've made mistakes, own them. If you've been arrogant, humble yourself. If you've misused trust, repair it. Life gives second chances, but not to people who keep lying to themselves about who they are. In the end, I found peace with that verdict because it served both justice and hope. Thank you for being here. Please share this. The punishment was real, but so was the chance to change. And he did begin to change. That matters. We are not frozen in our worst moment unless we refuse to learn. I still believe people can turn around. I have to believe that, or I could never sit on that bench. So I leave you with this. Stand tall but stay humble. Honor your family by your conduct, not your excuses. Comment below. Was I too harsh? Don't wave borrowed power around like it makes you important. Be kind, be accountable, be decent. If this story stayed with you, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs it. From my heart to yours, bless your heart. Good luck to you and God bless.